My Grandfather's Altar with Richard Camp. Richard is Oglala Lakota, a fifth-generation Lakota healer, tribal historian, and spiritual leader, a calling he explores in his book, My Grandfather's Altar. He holds a master's degree in mental health counseling with an emphasis in behavioral health from Sinta University. He teaches at SGU, provides counseling and cultural consultation throughout Indian country, and lectures on Lakota history, culture, and traditions. In 2021, he was named a Luce Indigenous Knowledge Fellow. Please help me in welcoming Richard Camp.
Thank you, my relative, and thank you, everybody, all my relatives. I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad that you're here. And we spent a little time talking about the history of another perspective from the Lakota culture. And I recently finished a book about my family. It's called My Grandfather's Altar, and it really addresses the family and the infrastructure of a common Lakota family. And I wanted to share those stories because there are so many stories about Native and Lakota families that are written about us, but nothing hardly was ever written by us, so, or from us. So this will be a book that I received instructions from my grandfathers to share it at some point, and it took me about 12 years to put it together because it was all written in Lakota language, and to translate it into an English, and then from the English transcribe it into what is now the book called My Grandfather's Altar. But it addresses the importance of relationship and family. And that's why I wanted to put it into a book in literature so that my family, particularly my children, will hear it from us about importance of family, the importance of the kinship role, and how we are connected into this world that we live in. So it's a very different story from what is written in the literatures. First of all, I'm very happy to be here to one of these events. This will be my first one. Well, actually, it's my second one. That was the one at University of Los Angeles in California. And it was interesting to share stories about different places. And the movement of telling our stories about our families has just now begun. And I encourage all the younger generations to do family history and family relationship. So my great-grandfather was born 1837, and he passed away in 1916. And he passed his teachings on to his grandson, which was my grandfather. My grandfather's name was Sam Chips Camp, and he was born 1891 and died 1973. And that's when I was born in 1956. So I spent most of my young life with my grandfather and my grandparents and the people in that generation. And it was very interesting to hear their stories and compared to what is written about our people today. So this is just another perspective. I'm not trying to change anybody or have anybody agree with me. I'm just sharing a story about Lakota people. Now, most of our teachings is based around prayer and the values that we were born with. The creation story. There's so many creation stories out there, but from my family's perspective, the earth is the most powerful being, the goddess, and we call her Unchi Makha, Grandmother Earth. In our world, in the Lakota cultural world from the beginning, everything around us is based on the foundation of the motherhood. Our mothers are very important to the Lakota and all the indigenous people. Throughout the years, our people were changed. A different kind of belief was synchronized into our consciousness for many generations. So we think that God is a male. Every time we in our mind we say Creator God, deep inside our mind, just generally all humans in this world, we think God is a strong being, but somehow we imagining a male God. But reading the stories from the ancestors, Creator God could be just as well be a woman. He might have been a lady, the woman spirit. And that really kind of changes us. And some of you probably say, oh, no way, no, Jesus is a man or God is a man. It's always going to be that way. That's what they think. But what I learned from growing up, Creator God could have been just as well a female or mother. We always call Mother Earth a mother, a Wian. And all of our teachings throughout the Native history, Lakota history, a woman gave us the teachings about how to be a human being. And that's what the book is really addressing, a human being. And what's important for humans to live in a world today, which we always forget, is walking in balance. In order to live a good life and healthy life in Mother Earth, you got to have balance. You got to have balance. You cannot live a healthy life without balance. So from the creation story, we are all related. When you hear the native people address each other after prayers or after talks or whatever, they always say, all my relations. And there's books about, literatures about addressing what it means to be all my relatives. Now, human being, when we say all my relatives, we might think about our mom or sister or brothers and stuff like that, and it ends right there. But in a wider perspective, take a look at that. We are all related to everything in the world that is. The four-legged, the winged nation, the relative animals that live in the water, underneath the water, everywhere. We're all somehow connected. And even the birds, the winged nation, they gotta fly, but at some point they gotta land on Earth. They can't stay up there forever. And same way with us. Our minds and our spirits fly like the winged relatives because we're related to them. Our ideologies and our similarities in our dimensional reality is always, we gotta land, we gotta root ourselves. So that's what the book is come close to translating. It starts with a humble start from the great-great-grandfather. When he was a child, I believe his father passed away, and his mother married another Lakota man. But even back then, the stepfather-stepmother relationship is not always solid. There's always a question, and everybody, I'm pretty sure some of you experienced having a stepfather, stepmother. The love bond is not really solid. It's always sort of fragile, brittle. It's always acceptance, but not too much, That's a human thing. And That happened to my great-grandfather. His stepfather didn't like him for some reason. And he was just a child. But the concept of Alma relations he experienced at a younger age. And one day his stepfather was very mean to him. And he was, our sensitivities is very fragile, and we all have, we all have feelings. There's a boundary within us. Somebody hurts your feelings enough, you'll do something. You'll either walk away or you'll do something. So the grandfather at age 9 or 10, he ran away from home. And the way they described the book, he ran away from the Black Hills area. He was headed for the grandmother land in Canada. His mother had a brother living over there, so he wanted to connect with the bond with the uncle. And as a young man, he wasn't prepared for a trip, but he made a journey anyway. He sort of gave up his will to live. Either I'll find my uncle or I'll be dead. Either way, but I'm going. And that's where the story begins. And along the way, he ran out of supplies. And back in those days, you can't just go anywhere. You got to watch out for not so friendly neighbors, different tribes. The war has always been around us from the beginning of time. So he hides during the day and travels through the night. And he took his chances to make a 1,500-mile, thousands of mile trip by himself. Well, he got lost along the way, and he was surrounded by some wolves, some timber wolves, prairie wolves, whatever they were. And back in those days, wolves go around in packs. And of course, they all do that to live. They got to live by hunting and killing. So there was kind of common knowledge that if you see a bunch of wolves, you go the other way. You hide. But anyway, he was surrounded by them, and he knew that they were going to either have him for lunch. He wasn't a very big guy. But one time they stayed by him close enough to keep an eye on him. And nighttime he'll take his chances in sleeping, and those wolves will surround him and lay around him. Until one time, one broke communication with him. The power of belief is always with human beings. Either we think or we believe. That's always a common thing with being human. If you think about something, your energy goes in there. If you believe in something, you believe in that, so you don't need to think about it, you believe it. And this young man believed that somebody is going to come and rescue him. Doesn't know who, but somebody will. And that one of those wolves communicated with him and said, we're going to take you to your journey. Don't be afraid of us, but cooperate with us, work with us. So he did. During the nights, they will follow, they will go lead him, and he will follow. Early in the morning hours, he'll hide under a bush, and those wolves disappear. After a number of days of doing that, he finally came to a place. He was hungry. Those wolves bring him back things to eat, liver, kidneys, things that are edible to the humans. And that's how he survived. And when he finally reached this place, those wolves said, this is as far as we can take you. Here on, you're on your own. But before they left, one of them said, don't forget about us. Always keep us in mind. And so he did. He went to found his uncle, and he grew up in the Hunkpapa people in Canada. And he knew that inside of himself, he knew that because of his strong belief in living, that he had a relationship with four-leggeds. When he sends his voice out, he also ultimately believes that someone heard him. Somebody heard his voice. Just like when you pick up a phone and you dial a number and somebody picks up on the other end. But if you dial the wrong number, it'll say you reached the wrong number. Sorry, or if somebody else will pick it up. It's kind of like the way he believes that when he sends his voice, somebody picked it up. So he started living as a child. He knew that he had a gift. And when the people were ill or suffering, they would ask him to come. And he didn't have any special tools or big altar or anything. He just simply from his heart, he would send his voice out to wherever, to asking it, whatever, for healing for this person or this animal or whatever. And it happens. And he surprised himself that he had the gift. He didn't have to go through schooling. He didn't have to go through anything. He inherited a power by just being human being. But believing, that's what got him to where he was at. Believing, and that happens to everybody. We all can do that. We all can believe, or we can do a lot of thinking. Well, you can't do both. It's always got to be one or the other. So that's the story about how he had two families. His first wife, he had some children, and then his wife passed away, so he had a second marriage. And that's where my generation came from. So he grew up, and when he got older, he wanted to reconnect with his people on this side, so he started migrating back this way. Along the way, he met a lot of friends, met a lot of people, and because of his ability, he never once shared it with anybody. He didn't say, I'm a medicine man or I'm a healer. He didn't say anything about that. He was just a simple human being. But his conviction in Creator God, whatever that is very strong. And how a person can reach that point, it lies within all human beings. Everybody's got power. Everyone has a lot of power. Without realizing that, some of us don't even believe in our own power, but everybody has the energy. All you got to do is start believing in yourself, believing in the balance. So his story shares, in order to live this world, you got to have a balance, you have to have a direction. We start out from the west direction, north direction, east direction, and south direction. And he teaches you to place yourself in the middle, imagining that you are in the middle of a world around you. You're not one side, you'll always be in the middle. And as long as you stay in the middle with your power and your belief, you'll make it through the world. No matter what the measures and challenges that you go through, you will make it to the end of your time. Knowing in your consciousness, no one lives here forever. We're just passing through. And those directions have a deep meaning of what it is to be a human being. And being human, we come into the world from the south direction. We believe that the mother, it's a wiya, the mother wiya is the entrance from a human world and exit to the human world, connected to the Mother Earth. So as a child, he believed that his mother, development in the womb, development inside of her soul and body, and he was being prepared. A child is being ready. And before the time to come to the world, the woman suffers what it is to have pain in the world. He goes through that as a natural human being. From that teaching, from our mothers, we learn about two kinds of pain in this world. One pain, we suffer with tremendous amount of pain, but it doesn't stay forever. It ends. Another kind of pain that stays with you forever, and it shapes your character and alters your sanity and alters your worldview. So the two pains are very painful. One stays you forever, one short-lives you. The woman teaches us that. The woman goes through extreme measures giving birth to the child. His belief was that we are already baptized the time we came into this world. And our baptismal, our mother's blessing from the pain turned into joy and turned into life-changing. And our mothers are gods. That's what we learned. We don't really understand or comprehend the dynamics and the holiness of what is love. You can look at it, love in Webster's dictionary or any literature, and the love describes different things. But if you believe in Creator and your mother, love is approached to you from a very different perspective. Unconditional love, the price we pay for what is love. We protect it. And we live in the world, in the modern world today, that old man Chips described what it is going to be like in the future. Our world is busy suffering for looking for a perspective that the concept of love that fits into our soul. We bring in all kinds of things to define our definition of what is love, but we find out it doesn't fit. We reach our frustrations points and we get rid of it. We continue looking for love, but we forgot the real synchronized, embedded love that we were born with. That's the true love. The world is shaped and changed by just a simple spirit, the freedom of spirit, what is love. The world is suffering today because love is not there. Simple answer to that, in my country there's a high rise of suicides, family breakups, people live in poverty, people believe and live in violence, school shootings, family shootings, the violence. But why is it like that? Simply, there was no love there. Love was taken away. Sometimes it's taken away by other people. But love was always the teaching behind the true relationship to Creator. We all live with the fear of not ever being loved again. We inherit that. We weren't born with that. We inherit that in a world. We were all running scared about not being able to simply love anybody again. So he teaches that, and he tells us that we got these directions. For our people, the horse nation was a relative. They placed themselves on the west directions. The reason why our people did that is because of the tremendous amount of power that the horse nation represents. Even though the horse is a four-legged being, and it's going to die someday, the horse has about 10 times more power than the human being. And that means that he has 10 times more ability to love other people, humans, non-humans. The horse can give you unconditional love that your mind cannot comprehend, conceptualize the love of the four-legged. And the horse is related to the wolf nation, coyotes, the dogs, the domesticated dogs. They're all related. Just like you have cousins, you have brothers. They all come from one nation. So the dogs is a real important relative to the human world. How many of you have dogs in your homes? All of us. Yeah, so we didn't kill them at the gravel pit. We love them. The animal lovers in the world is really strong now. Our people were the founders of that amongst our communities. The dog, we believe that dog is a human in four-legged. He can listen to all your confessions and sins in the world, and he's never going to tell anybody. He's going to take it to his grave. The Pope, John Paul, might tell somebody if you say something to him. He might, if it's juicy enough, he might say, "Hey, guess what? Come here." But life, our relationship to the animal, represents our own power. We have tremendous amount of power that we cannot even realize it. I have this. And everybody has tremendous amount. God gave it to us through the mother. And then we go to north directions, we have the Buffalo Nation as representing our human bodies, the blood that we borrow, the simple relationship to the animal nation. Buffalo was part of our way of life because we grew up out here. We grew up around there. And the more and more stories about buffalo, the lifestyle and the way they behave. A lot of people own buffaloes nowadays. I had no idea, don't know anything about buffaloes until I was like sixth grader, because for a long time those information were removed from our people. So we knew a lot about the regular cow or pig, but buffalo was really something for me, until I learned it from the ancestors about teachings in the later on years. But all we knew was that the buffalo has a mind of a human being. He just doesn't talk to us. But his feelings, his angry, his attitudes, his happy times. And the other day I was going towards the Black Hills to do some shopping. From where I live to Black Hill, there's a Badlands, there's a long, whoever owns that property raised some buffaloes. And I think it was the most beautiful sight. All the tourists are parked along the cars taking pictures. The buffaloes was all. But on this side, there's only one buffalo, no buffalo, just one, grazing around by himself. He doesn't want to be bothered. And I was looking at that, and this guy's a bull buffalo, If I was him, I should be over there, But he decided to be by himself. And it reflects back on a story about buffaloes know when to prepare to go the other world. We all want to be alone sometimes. We all want to be a lone world. And the buffalo that gets angry, depressed, just like us. They get depressed, they get feelings. So they're not always sacred. They're like humans. We're here to be humans. We're not always sacred. Sometimes we get off balance. We don't take care of ourselves when we're supposed to. That buffalo was representing that concept. He was probably getting ready to go in the other world. Well, he didn't want to be bothered. He had enough. He had enough buffalo females. Time for him to retire. Whatever the story was, it reflects back onto our behavior. Sometimes you can be surrounded with a lot of people around you, but you can still be just as lonely as that buffalo. It all depends on what you decide to carry, what you decide to let go, what you decide to keep, what you decide. Sometimes you keep unwanted experiences. Sometimes you keep things that are synchronized into your being by somebody else. Somebody put in your mind that you're not good enough. Somebody kept putting in your mind that you're a sinner. And all these things, we learned it from childhood. It affects our character, the way we look at the world. But in reality, reading my grandfather's book, we're all good people. There ain't no such thing as sinners, and there ain't no such thing as bad people. We're all good people. It's just that we made ourselves believe that. We just made ourselves believe that we're not good enough for one another. But we're all umshika, we're pitiful people, we're good people, and we're going to die good people. It doesn't matter what you did. Whatever the sin that you might have did, God forgave you a long time ago. God said, you're okay. You're going to come to me someday. I'm not going to cast you off anywhere. It's just that our minds are made like that we hold things against each other. We don't forgive, we don't let go. It's like when you catch a bird, and it's so beautiful, you want to hold on to that bird because of you. My own personal feelings, I'm not going to let this beautiful, and the bird wants to fly away and begging you, let me be, but no, I don't want to, That's how we all are. We all possess things. We all think that love is ownership. We all think we want to love something. But our ancestors, when he taught us, we don't really have anything in this world. We don't have anything in this world. We came without nothing, and we're going to leave without anything. All these things are just an illusional reality that we hang on to everything. I want my land to go that way. I don't want my land to go to her, all these things like that. But it doesn't matter. It's going to always be here while we're long gone. So the power of the four directions, the elk gives us intelligence, gives us a dream. And life will not be possible if we don't dream. Dreaming is a gift from Creator that takes you to the forethought about somebody else. And all the people that you have met, their voices and their memory is synced in your consciousness. So imagining all your loved ones that died, went away, take a look at that again. They never went anywhere. Their voice is still inside you. They never left you. Hundreds of people that you came across rest themselves inside. And that's where your dream comes from. You dreamed about somebody that you might have ran across several years ago, but that voice still. How many of you lost your loved ones, your mothers, your fathers? And I'll bet from the time they went, from the time to time, you had a dream about them. They might have came to you, or you might have seen somebody that reminded you of your loved ones. That's because they never left. Their energy, part of their energy stays inside of your gift, your domain, your soul. So in our belief that when somebody dies, we bury them on the ground, in our belief that they went somewhere, heaven or hell, my brother-in-laws. But they never went anywhere. They were here with us all the time, the spirit being, which leads to, when he interpreted Creator God, we were conditioned so when we say God, we kind of look up in the space. But God, Wakantanka, is really inside of all of us. He's in there and he's guiding you. He forgave you a long time ago. And if you have health problems or whatever, God is already taking care of that for you. Someday when you leave this world, Creator God is going to pick you up and see your ancestors somewhere. There's another being that we all have some belief, some not belief, but it's there somewhere. So that's what the translation of my book about my grandfather was all about. And for a period of time when his second generation of his children, our ceremonies became outlawed. They didn't want us to do this way. They didn't want us to talk about our ceremonies, our culture. So they didn't put it away. They simply went underground. And a generation of my great-grandfather and my grandfather, a little bit about my father's generation, the medicine men, they don't exist. It's just a word. Somebody created a word. But they hid way deep inside. And when you find out that trail on the inside, there's another world within the world that we live in. And that was really amazing for me to understand that there's another world within. What you saw in the modern world, if you take a look at it, it's a different story from another world. And it really opened my eyes to look at myself deeper. The Sundance and the ceremonies came back to our culture, but it came back from a different perspective when it left from a different world and it stayed hidden. What the only ceremony that was brought back to us in the late 1800s by the supervision of the government was the powwow. The powwow, we called it Ikpazo Wachipi. There was a time when the dance, they show all the best beadwork so people can see it, and they do the dance. And then that was it. Socialize, mostly everybody get together and they eat and they renew, because back in those days nobody had cell phones or Facebook or anything. Everybody, when you don't see them, it's really, you don't see them for a long time. Even though people lived over here, people don't see the people of Western South Dakota for a very long time. So when they see each other, they embrace each other and really happy because that could be the last time. So the world that we live in, the ceremonies remain underground. it stayed like that until the people that had that generation left. So our ceremonies came back through a powwow type, performance. Sundance was a healing ceremony. Sundance was a life-giving ceremony. But now it's just a performance. Our virtues say to our people, pray. They always, no matter what, pray. You probably heard it to your ancestors too. Pray. When a relative dies, pray. When the hospital, a relative, we go there to pray. Our children, Holy Communion, our children, birthdays, we pray. But our ancestors, for a long period of time, we were confused because they taught us how to pray a different way. We learned to read scriptures. If somebody else is praying, we're repeating it, and we synchronized that into our belief system. So our ability to reach to create a God became very limited. And we looked at the world from our inabilities rather than our true reality. So our life in our world today is really a challenging because our people don't speak the language anymore. Hardly a very small percent. Everything is from a synchronized, altered reality. Native American people, when we're born on the reservations, our first language, whether we believe it or not, is English anymore. Nobody speaks. Our Lakota language became a secondary. So our children came into the world looking at it from a different perspective, not from a native perspective. So it's a challenge now, and our ancestors were really supportive from the beginning about what education is. Education is a sacred circle. Education is a holy circle. And our ancestor says education concept is a red, which means that the power of learning from the gift, whether you go to university or you go to your relatives, education is a must. The equational reality of our indigenous people, we had our own equations. The physics and the mathematics and Celsius and all of the things put in one, our native people were the masters of our own equation. That was taken away a long time ago. Our journey explains how many winters. To us, every season is sacred. Right now, we're coming up to Christmas, and our whole world conditioned itself to celebrate Christmas, and people go through stress, and people go through sadness, and the little ones really enjoy that Christmas, and they say, oh, this is going to be the birth of Christ, and they celebrate. But the older ones, we mix with sadness because our loved ones are not there anymore. And those are times when they brought our own memories back. So we forgot the joy and the sacredness of that season. But 100 years ago, the winter time, before we knew about what Christmas was educational rebirth, Waniatu. Waniatu was a time when we bring all the relatives and we transport knowledge to our children, and knowledge of equations, knowledge of science, knowledge of that. It was taught to us in a very different way. And that's what the book talks about. That being human being, we have our natural equations. No matter what, we count the winter. I'm going to be turning 69 here pretty soon. And back then, when the old people, they will say, how many winters are you? That's how you ask your birthday. They don't say how many years or how many years, but they say winter. And it's a sacred question because winter is a time when we grow. Winter is a time we grow older. Our Mother Earth, we're the Badlands people. We live around this area. So as we get old, they said we look like the earth, I believe that because my brother-in-laws look like the Badlands. So I kind of go look and say, you're getting old. But our winters are very, it's a blessing in a level of a deeper sacred circle. They said when your human hair is white, you've been blessed. You reached a different level of life. God blessed you. You became a wisdom keeper. You became another status in the world. So the circle that we used to set back in the meetings and gatherings, relatives that have white hair, they sit in a special area. And the people that have younger and the children, they all have a different form in a circle. So nowadays you see a human medicine wheel that's been designed, and people call it all kinds of names, medicine wheel, a circle of life, but it really represents human being. That's all it does. It's really human is being a beautiful life. You reach the gray hair level, and you are now a person without sin. You are a good person. You deserve a higher status in life. So, to me, sharing the book, it took me 12 years to read that book. And I come from a real humble reservation in the Pine Ridge and around 1950s and 60s. And, I went to a BIE controlled school, right, a local school. But when I went to school, all my relatives, they were my blood relatives. But nobody spoke Lakota. Only just a handful of us, and the rest all spoke English. And they used the psychological warfare on each other. So if you spoke Lakota, the non-speaking Lakota would turn around and make fun of you. So those guys are speaking something else, And it worked. The teacher would set us way back in the back room. We chose to sit there too because we don't want to be asked questions. We don't want to be asked to read a book because we can't. We just sat way back there, sit there. That's how we passed through our grade schools. And going into high school, we started learning English. But that time I didn't know that our ceremonies were outlawed. Nobody knew about sweat lodge right in my home community. There was only 1 or 2 sweats, and they were held way on the sticks. And when my classrooms, I go back home with them, and they'll say, "What is that?" And, I kind of gave up. I didn't want to be telling them that. It's just something there from a long time ago. So. But now, it's those people that wanted to find out, they became medicine people. They became spiritual leaders, conducting sweats and, holding sun dances and stuff like that. But it was a really humble beginning when the book also talks a little bit about my grandfather's coming age when he became friends with a special person. And it tells a very different story from what all of the literature that you read about Crazy Horse, all the things about, but the guy that grew up with him has a very different story about him. And the friend that he had, his name wasn't always Crazy Horse, but he has a big family now, Crazy Horse descendants, Crazy Horse relatives, everywhere. But back in those days, when he was a warrior, he didn't have any relatives. He didn't, even his own blood, uncles and similar, they stayed away from him only because he was able to have power. He wasn't a hateful person, like they said. He wasn't a hateful person that went to war savagely. He wasn't any of that. He was just a human being. And they said that his father could have been a white man. But nobody wants to admit that. Nobody said, no, I'm not going to accept that, But because of his color skin and hair was light, the relatives didn't like him too much. And then when he comes to the other world, he didn't know where to fit in. The one that became good friends with him was my great-great-grandfather. And they both lived together. And they lived all the way until they both died almost the same time. And the real Crazy Horse had to change his name and became a different person. And he died of old age. He died when he was 77 years old. And the great-grandfather was the one who buried him somewhere. So, according to my grandfather, the war leader that got killed in Fort Robinson in 1877 was not the right one. They killed the wrong man. But it just has to stay that way now because we come all this way believing that he was killed at Fort Robinson. We don't want to change that. We just want to leave it the way it is. But there's just a different story, and that's where this has to stay, I guess. But the change that shaped the lives of human beings, if you have another look at it, it'll tell you a different story. One of the stories about him is there was a time when all of our culture was outlawed. They moved us in 1889 to the present reservations. After 1877, when Crazy Horse was killed, or the man that represented him, the government came and they finally located Woftukhar Chips. They took him back to Washington, D.C., only to find out what is this power that you have. What is the power? Explain it to us what power is. And simply, you said it's God. It doesn't have any magic medicine or anything. It's a belief with you in God as a human being. We told him anybody can be powerful. Anybody can do the wonders of this world if you believe in yourself. And he said, and that's the gift that I inherited. So the government went and brought him a person that couldn't walk and said, could you help him? They wanted to see it. You know how us people are nowadays, we want to see it to believe it. So they did. They brought him a crippled boy, and he prayed for his friends wherever they're at, however they are, whatever they were. And sure enough, before he left, that boy got up and took some walks around the room. Now that changed the opening of those people that represented the government, that changed the perceptive and said, this man is real. How about another one, just to validate, they brought a blind person, and he did the same, and the blind person was able to walk and to see again. So instead of punishing him, the plan was to take him from there to Florida to hold him prisoner until he died there. But they said, we might be useful. So in turn, they gave him a document called sovereign immunity. They didn't prosecute him for performing healing ceremonies. So we still have that document today. It's sort of like a license. So all of the ceremonies that were outlawed, except for Woftukhar Chips, was given special permission, and he was still considered a prisoner of war, but he remained in the Pine Ridge Reservation, a place called Kyle, South Dakota. His house is now a military veteran cemetery they built over his house around it now. But he stayed there, and he was forbidden to leave the reservation. He had to stay there, and people bring him gifts and food and survive, but they said there's no reason for him to travel anywhere. Well, you know how us Indians are. We like to do the opposite sometimes. And so one day he saddled up his horse and he went to Black Hills and wandered around over there for a while, and he was coming back. And just before that he made that trip, there was a big forest fire started by lightning. So huge acres of land burned down. He was riding through there, and here he heard a dog winding around, a little puppy. So he was looking for that sound, and here he found a little dog, a black dog, lost in the burnt area. He looked around but didn't see the mother anywhere. So he picked up the black puppy and put it across his lap, and then he rode back to the reservation, to his cabin. And he took care of that little puppy, but he noticed something different about that puppy when he was getting bigger. It turned out to be a black bear. And then, so now he's really got a problem, this bear. But the bear was really friendly. He just understood the language. And he made friends with him. But as he got bigger, the bear has his own attitude, start wrecking things in the cabin, and he'll take off in the daytime, but evening time he'll be running back and coming in there. But he's talked to him in Lakota. He's lay still, lay there, lay right there. He lays there, gets up in the mornings, and thinks he's a regular household member. Well, the Indian agent from Washington comes to check on Chips from once in a while. One day he came to check on him, and he saw that bear, and he was really looking at it. And he said, "Who's that? What is that?" He said, "That's my son." He said, I said, I found him and I raised him. So he called him Mantro. Mantro, so shake hands with the visitor. So Mantro reluctantly ran over to the Indian Jesuit to kind of licked him around and kind of, he was very harmless. So then the Indian agent asked him, what are you going to do with that bear when you get older? He said, the old man Chip said, yeah, I thought about that. He said, I'm getting old and I'm not going to be able to take care of him. I'm worried about he might get killed if they see him out there because they don't know that he's my son. So I've really been praying about that. And here the Indian agent said, well, if he's friendly to humans, if it's all right with you, I'll take him from you and I'll keep him. I'll take good care of him. I'll promise you I'll really take good care of him. What do you want? He started reaching, how much money do you want from him? And the old man said, I can't sell my relative. That's my son. You can keep your money. But you can take him. He'll go with you. And he'll spend the rest of his life with you. Whatever you want to do with him, put him to a zoo or whatever. And he said, well, what you can help us, you got the power, is you left us here on the reservation. We got no life. We're just here. We're just doing nothing, just living. And he explained it to him of what a powwow is, wachipi, the social dance, drumming, eating, and celebrating, that enhances the life of the beauty of being the people. There's nothing harm in that powwow. He said, I'll see what I can do. And they took the bear, put a collar on him and on a wagon and got on a train at Rushville, Nebraska, and they headed east. He never saw the bear again. But a few months later, a train came from east, from Omaha, Nebraska. They came to Rushville, and then wagon trains from the military brought all kinds of cloth, beads, and everything that's needed to make a powwow regala, give them materials to make drum, and a letter authorizing the Lakotas to have the powwow again. He restored the powwow, and under the supervision of the government. So there's government regulations that were imposed. So you can still have the powwows, but at the beginning of each powwow, you got to include the military part of it. It's part of that. So nowadays, if you see a powwow, the grand entry, you'll see veterans wearing their uniform and carrying the United States flag. It's to show that we are two nations together, holding the flag sacred and the feathers sacred, and the restoration of our culture. A little piece started coming back to us. So a lot of people don't know that nowadays. It's not written in any books or anything like that. The first place where it's written is right in that book. But it was a powwow that brought a powwow back. And from that day, the Oyate, the people, gave the grandfather an Indian name called Encouraging Bear, the bear that encouraged us to continue our ceremonies. So that's the story that brought how we came back our ceremonies. And the Sundance ceremonies and all the rituals has been around, but they've been underground for a very long time. And the first time they start coming back was in 1928, the anniversary for the United States government and the Indian nations. So they had a Sundance in Pine Ridge and Rosebud. And then again, it appeared in 1960s under the powwow. That in the mornings they'll have the Sundance, and then in the afternoon they'll have the powwows. So it came back to us in a real humble way, and it's here. It's nowadays, the ceremonies, the powwow, everybody participates in it. It's not just the Indians, all people, the walks of life. It came a long way. Our children, it's a generation that's new in the future. I think that in modern era, we don't hold nothing pain in the back in the future in the history no more. You know, the future generation, they all got to do things together, pray together. And most importantly, to learn how to pray together. and everything else, it will be a better world. We've got a lot of different challenges, but it's going to be better. And the book is just the opening for hoping many families will start writing their own books. That's about 7 generations of my grandfather's history. And other editions coming out. And on my mother's side, my mother's from Rosewood Reservation. And so she's a great granddaughter of Spotted Tail. So the book is almost completed, but it's from the family's perspective of the grandfather. So that's what I brought here today. I'm very thankful to be a part of this great gathering about books. I've always loved reading books since growing up. I never really went to school until like I was nine years old. I didn't know how to read. I didn't know how to do a lot of things. And most of my life I worked for the area neighbor ranchers, fixing their fence or chasing their cows around and stuff like that. But one day I talked to my dad. What I learned from the elders back in those days, if the elder talks to you, he's talking to you in 2 languages. We're going to get there. The first simple language, and the second one is they call it earth language. There's always a spiritual message behind what they're saying. And I didn't get that for a long time growing up. When the elder talks to me, there's a hidden message underneath there. We didn't even realize that we're doing it ourselves. But I told my dad, I said, I think I'm going to find another trade. I'm tired. My hands are all getting calluses and fixing fences. I think I'm going to do something else. I think I'm going to go into social work. Visit a social worker and maybe some schooling or something. And my dad said, if you're going to do any of that, you got to learn how to read first. He said, you got to. That's what he said, read. I was thinking to myself, man, I'm not a good reader. Now I got to read. And so I got dressed and walked down to the local community college, and I signed up for college. And I started going to school. And nobody really taught me or gave me lessons. The counselor said, here's paper, just fill that up and go ahead. He just kind of like let me off. He didn't believe me, so I did the best to fill everything out and I turned it in my classes. So I just kept going to school, and semester ends, another one comes out. I just kept going. I was married and I had first daughter, and a number of years went by. I just kept going to school. I didn't have an education plan. That's what my dad said, so I was trying to obey my dad. And then one day, in 1983, I believe it was, my cousin was in charge of the community college, and he says, Richard, have you ever thought about graduating from here? And so I said, I was waiting for my class, and I said, what? I didn't know you're supposed to graduate from these things. I said, oh, wow. Well, where do I do that at? He said, well, let's check it out. He took out my status sheet, it looks like a catalog, and was just going flipping over. He'll be looking at me, and then he'll be flipping over. And he said, Richard, you graduated from this place 2 years ago, he said. I said, really? He said, yeah, you got 2 bachelor's degrees. Oh, wow. Yes, I didn't know what that means, but they gave me, I walked through the graduation line, and I was all fixed up. Got 2 degrees. And I talked to my dad. I said, look, you told me to read, and look, they gave these to me. That means I don't have to go back there no more. And he's looking at it, and he said, that's good for you, but that's not what I meant when I told you to read. I said, oh, man, what did you mean? He said, well, he says, in order to be a public servant, in order to work for people of any kind, you got to learn to read the world around you. 4 directions, Creator God and you. Once you know how to understand to read the human and the earth language, then you can do just about anything else you did. So I said, if you said it like that a long time ago, I would have never went to school, But anyway, thank you for inviting me, and I'm very happy to be here.